The witness. The arrow meant for King Davith pierced the tapestry 3 inches from Mira's head. She didn't scream. 23 years of surviving in the forgotten corners of the Bloodstone Court had taught her that much. Silence was a weapon sharper than any blade. Instead, she watched the feathered shaft quiver against woven silk while chaos erupted around her. Guards shouted. Ladies-in-waiting scattered like startled doves, and King Davith, the alpha whose very presence made the air crackle with dominance, turned those wolf-gold eyes directly on her. "You!" His voice cut through the pandemonium. "What did you see?" Mira's pulse hammered. She was a seamstress, invisible by design, the girl who mended royal garments and kept her gaze lowered. But she'd seen everything. The archer's position in the eastern colonnade, the silver wolf insignia on his bracer, the deliberate way he'd adjusted his aim at the last second. He'd missed on purpose. "I saw nothing, Your Majesty." The lie tasted like copper on her tongue. Davith moved with predatory grace, closing the distance between them until she could smell cedar and winter storms. His hand caught her chin, tilting her face upward. The touch sent electricity skittering across her skin. Wrong, dangerous, undeniable. "You're lying." His thumb traced her jawline, a gesture too intimate for a king and a nobody. "Your heartbeat gives you away." Before Mira could respond, a second presence materialized from the shadows. A man who moved like smoke given form. Where Davith radiated raw power, this stranger embodied controlled lethality. Dark hair fell across sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of midnight assessed her with unnerving intensity. "She's protected by the old laws," the stranger said, his accent marking him as someone from the rival kingdom of Ashenmoor. "Touch her without consent, and you break the treaty." Davith's growl resonated in Mira's chest. "You dare invoke treaties while your assassin targets my throne, Kieran?" So this was Prince Kieran, the shadow of Ashenmoor, the man rumored to have personally eliminated 17 threats to his family's crown. The assassin prince now stood in the Bloodstone Court, close enough to kill, speaking of protection. "My assassin?" Kieran's smile held no warmth. "I think you'll find the truth far more complicated." Mira's mind raced. The silver wolf wasn't Ashenmoor's symbol. It belonged to the Silverclaw Rebellion, a faction that wanted both kingdoms destroyed. But why would anyone frame Ashenmoor for an assassination attempt that deliberately failed? "I'll tell you what I saw," she heard herself say, voice steadier than her nerves. "But I want protection. From both of you." The 2 most dangerous men in 2 kingdoms locked eyes over her head. Ancient rivalry, political catastrophe. War balanced on a knife's edge, and somehow, impossibly, Mira stood at the center of it all. What secret did Mira witness that could topple kingdoms? Follow this chapter to discover how one seamstress became the key to preventing war, or igniting it. Comment below with your theories about who really sent that arrow. The bargain. The private council chamber felt too small for the amount of power contained within its stone walls. Mira perched on the edge of an ornate chair, hyper-aware that the silk cushion beneath her probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. King Davith prowled the perimeter like a caged wolf, while Prince Kieran leaned against the far wall with deceptive casualness, a viper coiled to strike. "Talk!" Davith commanded. Mira's fingers twisted in her lap. Everything in her screamed to stay invisible, to fade into the background as she'd always done. But that arrow had shattered her carefully constructed anonymity. There was no going back. The archer wore a silver wolf bracer, she began, watching both men's reactions. But his technique was wrong for a silver claw fighter. They shoot with a double draw. This man used a single finger release, the method taught in the Ashenmoor Military Academy. Kieran's expression didn't flicker, but something shifted in his posture. Clever girl. Not clever enough to fake ignorance, Davith growled. He stopped his pacing directly in front of her. You're saying someone trained in Ashenmoor's methods wants us to blame the Silverclaws? Or someone wants to frame Ashenmoor by using their technique poorly enough to be noticed? Kieran interjected, his gaze fixed on Mira with unsettling focus. Tell me, seamstress, who taught you to read an archer's training by their release? Heat crept up Mira's neck. This was the secret she'd guarded for years, the truth that could get her killed in a dozen different ways. My father was a weapons master, before he was executed for treason. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Thomas Ashford. Davith's voice held something between recognition and rage. The man who tried to broker peace between our kingdoms 15 years ago. The man who died for it, Mira corrected, meeting the Alpha King's eyes for the first time without flinching. Hung in the public square because diplomacy was considered weakness. She'd been 8 years old, watching from a crowd as they'd taken everything from her. After that, invisibility had been survival. Kieran pushed off the wall, his movements fluid and purposeful. Your father corresponded with my mother before his death. She spoke of him as the only honest man in Bloodstone. And yet you lead assassins now, Mira shot back. The words escaped before wisdom could stop them. Something dangerous flickered in Kieran's eyes. Not anger, but interest. I lead soldiers who do what's necessary. There's a difference. Is there? Davith's question held layers of meaning. Because right now, someone is trying to restart a war that nearly destroyed both our kingdoms. And the woman who can identify them is sitting between us, unprotected except by words on a treaty nobody respects. Mira's chest tightened. That's why I asked for protection from both of you. An impossible request, Davith said, but his tone had shifted, less commanding, more contemplative. Unless she stays with both of us, Kieran finished. Neutral ground. Protected by dual authority. The suggestion hung in the air like a spark near kindling. You're proposing she live under shared custody? Davith's laugh held no humor. A seamstress shuttled between kingdoms like a political bargaining chip? I'm proposing she becomes the bridge her father died trying to build. Kieran's midnight eyes found Mira's. Someone both courts trust. Someone who can move between our worlds while we hunt whoever wants this war. Mira's breath caught. It was absurd. Dangerous. Exactly the kind of visibility she'd spent years avoiding. It was also the only path forward that didn't end with her throat cut in some dark alley. I have conditions, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Both men turned to her with expressions of startled respect. Mira just negotiated with kings. But what price will she pay for stepping into the light? Next chapter reveals the dangerous conditions she'll demand and the impossible choice ahead. What do you think she should ask for? Share your thoughts below. The Price of Truth. The contract took 3 hours to draft and felt like signing away her soul in carefully measured increments. Mira stood at the window of the tower between, a neutral fortress on the border between Bloodstone and Ashenmoor that hadn't housed occupants in a decade. Dust motes swirled in the afternoon light while behind her, Davith and Kieran argued over the specifics of her existence like merchants haggling over merchandise. "She needs access to both courts," Kieran insisted. "Full access, not the servants' quarters." "She needs protection that doesn't look like imprisonment," Davith countered. "The moment my nobles think I'm showing favor to Thomas Ashford's daughter, they'll sharpen their knives." Mira closed her eyes. Her father's name still carried weight, the wrong kind. In Bloodstone, he was remembered as a traitor who'd favored Ashenmoor. She didn't know what story they told in the Northern Kingdom, but suspected it wasn't much better. "Your nobles are already sharpening their knives," she said without turning. "That's the point. Someone in your court commissioned that assassination attempt. Someone with access to Ashenmoor military training and Silverclaw symbolism." "Which narrows it down to about 50 people, Davith said darkly. "Anyone with enough gold can buy expertise. Or loyalty." Kieran's voice came closer. Mira felt him stop beside her at the window, near enough that his sleeve brushed hers. "The Silverclaws have been recruiting from both kingdoms, promising equality, an end to the Alpha bloodlines." "They're not wrong about the bloodlines," Mira murmured. She'd seen enough of royal cruelty to understand the appeal of revolution. Davith's sharp intake of breath told her she'd crossed a line, but when he spoke, his words surprised her. "No, they're not." She turned to find the Alpha King watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Without the public mask of authority, he looked younger than his 28 years, and infinitely more tired. "My father ruled with brutality," Davith continued. "When he died last year, I inherited a kingdom held together by fear and a court full of vultures waiting to see if I'd be weak." His jaw tightened. "I can't afford to be weak." "But I also can't afford to become him." The vulnerability in those words struck something deep in Mira's chest. She'd spent so long seeing Davith as the symbol of everything that had destroyed her family that she'd never considered he might be trapped too. "The Silverclaws offered me asylum once," she admitted. 3 years ago, after a noble tried to force himself on me in the sewing rooms." Kieran's stillness became predatory. "Name him." "Dead already," Mira said. "Hunting accident, they claimed. But I heard the Silverclaws took credit in the underground circles." She looked between both men. "I didn't take their offer because I didn't believe their version of equality would be any better. Just different masters wearing different crowns." "And now?" Davith asked. "What do you believe now?" Mira considered the question carefully. The afternoon sun painted both men in amber light, Davith with his warrior's build and barely contained dominance, Kieran with his assassin's grace and calculating intelligence. 2 sides of the same coin, both deadly, both damaged by the weight of kingdoms. "I believe someone is playing all of us," she said finally. The failed assassination, the mixed signals, the timing right before the treaty renewal summit. She moved to the table where the contract lay. "I believe whoever wants this war knows exactly how to manipulate both kingdoms into destroying each other." "And you think you can stop it?" Kieran's skepticism was almost gentle. "No." Mira picked up the quill. "But I think I can help you find who's really pulling the strings. My father believed peace was possible. I'd like to prove he wasn't a fool for trying." The nib touched parchment, her signature binding her to an impossible mission. 2 kingdoms, 2 powerful men, and a seamstress who'd spent her life invisible, now thrust into the center of political machinations that could destroy them all. Davith's hand covered hers before the ink dried. This will change you. Once you step into this role, there's no returning to invisibility. Good, Mira said, meeting his wolf gold eyes. I'm tired of hiding. Mira just sealed her fate between 2 kings, but what she doesn't know yet is that one of them is hiding a secret that could shatter everything. Next chapter, the treaty summit begins, and Mira discovers the real reason someone wanted Davith dead. What do you think the secret is? Drop your wildest theories below. The Summit of Thorns, the Great Hall of the Tower. Between had been transformed into a stage for political theater. Mira stood 3 steps behind Davith's throne, close enough to observe, distant enough to remain unobtrusive. Or so she'd thought. Every noble, diplomat, and court official who'd arrived for the treaty renewal summit had noticed her position. She felt their stares like brands against her skin. The Ashford girl, someone whispered, positioned between the kings, bold or suicidal. Mira kept her expression neutral, a skill perfected through years of surviving court cruelty. She wore a gown that walked the line between kingdoms, bloodstone red silk with Ashenmoor's silver embroidery threading the sleeves. Davith had insisted. Kieran had approved. She felt like a declaration of war wrapped in expensive fabric. Across the hall, Kieran sat with casual authority among his delegation, but his midnight eyes tracked her constantly. It should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt like being anchored. "The summit will now commence," announced Lord Brecon, Davith's elderly advisor. "The treaty renewal requires unanimous approval from both kingdoms' high councils." What followed was 3 hours of political posturing dressed in diplomatic language. Mira's mind catalogued everything: who spoke when, who deferred to whom, which alliances revealed themselves through seating arrangements and subtle gestures. Then Lady Thorne stood, and the temperature in the room dropped. "Before we discuss peace," the Bloodstone noblewoman said, her voice carrying like a blade, "perhaps we should address the assassination attempt on our king, an attempt traced to Ashenmoor training." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Kieran didn't react, which told Mira he'd been expecting this. "The investigation is ongoing," Davith replied, his tone carefully neutral. Evidence suggests that Ashenmoor wants our king dead," Lady Thorne interrupted. "And yet here we sit, discussing renewal of a treaty with those who tried to murder him." Mira's pulse quickened. This was the play. Force Davith to either accuse Ashenmoor publicly or appear weak to his own nobles. "The evidence suggests manipulation," Kieran said, rising with predatory grace. "Someone wants us at each other's throats. The question is, who benefits from war between our kingdoms?" "The Silver Claws," spat Lord Vance, one of Ashenmoor's war hawks. "They've been trying to destabilize both thrones for years." "Or perhaps," Lady Thorne said sweetly, "the explanation is simpler. Perhaps Ashenmoor grows tired of sharing resources and trade routes." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Mira watched nobles shift, hands moving toward concealed weapons, guards tensing along the walls. They were seconds from violence. "I saw the archer," Mira heard herself say. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Davith's jaw tightened. They hadn't planned this. But Mira was done watching politics dance around truth. The archer wore Silverclaw symbols but used Ashenmoor technique. She continued, stepping forward despite her hammering heart. But there was something else. Something I didn't mention in the private council. Kieran's expression sharpened. Davith looked like he wanted to either throttle her or pull her back to safety. "The arrow itself," Mira said. "I examined it after the guards removed it. The fletching was northern hawk, common in Ashenmoor, but the wood was southern ironbark, exclusive to bloodstone forests." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. "Are you suggesting a conspiracy involving both kingdoms?" Lord Brecken's voice trembled. "I'm suggesting someone with access to both kingdoms orchestrated this. Someone in this room." The accusation electrified the space. Nobles erupted into shouting. Guards drew weapons. Lady Thorne's face flushed with rage while Lord Vance looked calculatingly at Kieran. Then everything happened at once. A window exploded inward. Glass rained down like deadly snow. 3 figures in black dropped into the hall, moving with the fluid synchronicity of trained killers. And Mira realized with crystalline horror that this had been the plan all along. Trap both kingdoms' leadership in one room and eliminate them all. Davith moved first, shifting into something between human and wolf, his alpha power flooding the space. Kieran's blade appeared in his hand as if conjured, but the assassins weren't targeting the kings, they were targeting her. Strong arms yanked Mira backward as a knife whistled past where her throat had been. She stumbled into Davith's solid chest as Kieran appeared in front of them both, his blade deflecting a second strike with inhuman speed. "The girl dies. The treaty dies," one assassin hissed. "No bridge, no peace." Understanding crashed over Mira like ice water. They'd been right. Someone wanted war. And killing her, the symbol of potential unity, would guarantee it. What she hadn't expected was both kings fighting side by side to protect her. The truth explodes. Someone in power wants Mira dead to ignite war. But as swords clash and blood spills in the Great Hall, a darker revelation awaits. Next chapter. Mira discovers which king has been lying and why the stakes are far more personal than she ever imagined. Who do you think is behind the conspiracy? Comment your theories. The Shattered Mask. The safe room beneath the tower between smelled of stone and secrets. Mira pressed her back against the cold wall, trying to slow her racing heart as sounds of combat echoed from above. Davith stood at the reinforced door, every muscle coiled for violence, while Kieran checked the room's other entrance with methodical precision. "They're contained," Kieran said, returning with blood on his sleeve. Not his own. "My guards have the assassins surrounded." "How many did we lose?" Davith's voice was granite. 3 of mine, 5 of yours. Civilians were evacuated before you knew there would be an attack." Davith turned, and something dangerous flickered in his wolf gold eyes. "Interesting timing, Prince Kieran." The accusation cleaved the air like an axe. Kieran went utterly still. "Choose your next words carefully, Davith. You positioned your guards perfectly, almost like you knew exactly where the assault would come from." Davith moved forward, alpha dominance rolling off him in waves. "Did you orchestrate this to frame the Silverclaws? To eliminate opposition in my court?" "Stop!" Mira commanded, pushing off the wall. Her hands shook, but her voice held steady. Both of you. Someone wants exactly this, wants us turning on each other. Or someone wants you to trust the wrong person, Davith said, but his attention remained locked on Kieran. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't know this was coming. Kieran's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Mira's stomach dropped. Then, I knew. The confession hit like a physical blow. Mira felt something crack inside her chest, a fragile trust she'd barely acknowledged building. There was chatter in my intelligence network, Kieran continued, his voice devoid of emotion, about an assault during the summit. But I didn't know the target would be Mira specifically. I thought they'd go for you, Davith. That's why I positioned my guards. And you didn't think to share this intelligence? Davith's fury was palpable. With the man whose court includes the very people trying to start this war? No. Kieran's eyes found Mira's. I was trying to protect the summit. Protect the treaty. I made a tactical choice. You made a choice that nearly got her killed. Davith stepped between them, physically blocking Kieran's view of Mira. The possessive gesture didn't escape anyone's notice. Don't pretend this is about protection, Kieran said coldly. You've been using her as bait since the moment you discovered her father's identity. The seamstress who could move between kingdoms, who could draw out conspirators. How convenient. Mira's breath caught. Is that true? Davith's silence was answer enough. Oh God. Mira backed against the wall again, pieces clicking into horrifying place. The contract. The visibility. You wanted me exposed. You wanted whoever was planning this to see me as a threat they had to eliminate. I wanted to flush out traitors, Davith said, turning to face her. Yes, but I also wanted to protect you. Every measure I put in place was designed to use me as a lure. Mira's voice cracked. Just like my father, used and discarded in the name of peace. That's not... Davith reached for her. Don't. She flinched away, and something like pain flashed across his face. You said this would change me. You were right, but you didn't mention you'd be the one manipulating that change. Kieran moved closer, his expression unreadable. Davith isn't wrong about one thing. Your visibility has drawn the conspiracy into the open. We now know they're willing to risk everything to eliminate you specifically. How comforting, Mira said bitterly. It means you matter. Kieran's voice softened infinitesimally. Not as bait, as the actual key to stopping this. Your father saw connections no one else did. You inherited that gift. And you want to exploit it just like Davith does. No. Kieran held her gaze. I want to honor it. There's a difference. The distinction felt razor thin, but something in his midnight eyes made Mira hesitate. Sincerity? Or just better deception? Both of you lied, she said finally. You by omission, Kieran. You by design, Davith. She looked between them. 2 kings, 2 killers, 2 men who'd become something more complicated than she'd ever intended. I'm done being anyone's chess piece. Then what do you want? Davith asked, and beneath his alpha authority, she heard genuine question. Mira thought of her father, swinging from the gallows for believing peace was possible. Thought of 23 years spent invisible and terrified. Thought of the arrow that had nearly ended her life and the 3 that followed in the Great Hall. I want the truth, she said. All of it. Who you both really are when the crowns come off. What you're both hiding that's worth dying for, and I want to choose, not be chosen for. What happens next? The demand hung in the underground chamber like a thrown gauntlet. Kieran spoke first. My mother was poisoned by Bloodstone extremists when I was 12. I've spent 16 years hunting the ones responsible while trying to prevent the war she died trying to stop. That's who I am, without the crown. Davith closed his eyes briefly. My father killed yours, Mira. Personally ordered the execution. He bragged about it on his deathbed, called it removing a peacemongering disease. His voice roughened. When I took the throne, I swore I'd never become him. But using you? That was exactly something he'd do. I'm terrified I'm turning into the monster I hated. The confessions shattered something and rebuilt it simultaneously. Mira's throat tightened with tears she refused to shed. You both carry ghosts. So do I. She straightened her spine. But ghosts don't get to dictate the future. We do, so here's what's going to happen. Above them, an explosion shook the foundations. Trust shattered, secrets revealed, and now a new threat emerges from the chaos. Final chapter coming next. Mira will make an impossible choice that determines the fate of 2 kingdoms, and discover the identity of the mastermind who's been pulling the strings all along. Will she choose Davith, Kieran, or forge an entirely new path? The stunning conclusion awaits. The Queen of Bridges. The explosion hadn't come from the Great Hall. It had come from beneath it, the ancient catacombs that connected the tower between to both kingdoms. Mira scrambled up the stairs behind Davith and Kieran, her mind racing faster than her feet. Someone had set charges in the foundations. Someone wanted the entire summit buried, literally, erasing any chance of peace. They burst into chaos. Nobles fled through collapsing corridors while guards tried to maintain order. Stone dust choked the air. Through a shattered window, Mira saw the tower's eastern wall beginning to buckle. Evacuation routes are compromised, Kieran's lieutenant reported, blood streaming from a cut on his temple. The charges were precise. They've sealed the main exits. Then we make new ones. Davith's body rippled with barely contained transformation. Kieran, can your people secure the North Passage? Already moving. Kieran gestured to his guards, their communication wordless and practiced. Mira watched the 2 kings coordinate with the efficiency of longtime allies rather than enemies, and something crystallized in her mind. This was what the conspirators feared most, not the treaty itself, but the possibility that Bloodstone and Ashenmoor could actually work together. There's another way, she said suddenly. The servants' tunnels. My father used them to smuggle correspondence between kingdoms. Both men turned to her. Show us, Davith commanded. Mira ran, leading them through passages she'd explored as a child during her father's secret diplomatic work. The tunnels were narrow, dark, and led to the old aqueduct system that predated the kingdom's separation. They emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by bioluminescent moss, and waiting at its center, surrounded by armed figures, was Lady Thorne. I should have known you'd remember these passages, the noblewoman said, her voice echoing off stone. Your father showed them to me once, when I was his apprentice in the arts of negotiation. Mira's blood turned to ice. You worked with my father? Before your king's father convinced me that peace was a fantasy. Lady Thorne's smile held no warmth. Thomas Ashford died believing both kingdoms could change. I've spent 15 years proving him wrong, and ensuring no one else could succeed where he failed. You've been orchestrating all of it, Kieran said, his blade already in hand. The assassination attempt. The summit attack. The explosions. Someone has to have the courage to embrace the inevitable. Lady Thorne gestured, and her soldiers raised crossbows. These kingdoms thrive on conflict. War is our natural state. Your little experiment in coexistence? She looked at Mira with something like pity. Doomed from the start, just like your father. Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded through Mira's veins. My father was braver than you'll ever be. He chose to believe in possibility instead of accepting defeat. And where did that get him? Lady Thorne sneered. Dead in a public square while cowards watched. It got him a daughter who survived, Mira said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Who learned? Who won't make his mistakes, but won't abandon his dream either. She stepped forward, placing herself directly between Davith and Kieran, between Bloodstone and Ashenmoor, between war and peace. You're right about one thing, Lady Thorne. These kingdoms have been at war for generations, but you know what's stronger than tradition? Mira's hands were steady now, her fear transmuted into purpose. Evolution. Change. The courage to try something impossible because the alternative is unacceptable. Pretty speech. Lady Thorne raised her hand. Won't stop arrows. No, Davith said, moving to Mira's left side. But we will. Kieran took position on her right. Together. What followed was beautiful, brutal chaos. Davith's alpha power filled the chamber as he partially shifted, becoming something between human and wolf, faster, stronger, devastating. Kieran moved like living shadow, his blade finding throats with surgical precision, and Mira, weaponless and untrained in combat, did what she did best. She saw the patterns. Kieran, left flank! 3 archers in the alcove! She called out. Davith, the support columns, they're damaged. Use them. She orchestrated the battle like she once orchestrated stitches in silk, seeing the connections others missed. Where Davith's strength could overwhelm, where Kieran's speed could exploit, how their different fighting styles complemented rather than competed. Lady Thorne realized too late that she'd made a fatal error. She'd united the very thing she'd spent years trying to prevent, 2 kingdoms fighting as one. When the last of her soldiers fell, Lady Thorne stood alone, her mask of control finally cracking. You can't stop this. Even with me gone, others will rise. The hatred runs too deep. Maybe, Mira said, approaching her father's former apprentice. But every generation gets to choose. My father chose peace and died for it. You chose war and will die for that. I choose something different. What? Lady Thorne spat. I choose possibility. No matter how many times it fails, no matter how many people like you try to kill it, I'll keep choosing it. Because that's what my father taught me, that the only way we truly lose is when we stop trying. Davith's hand found Mira's shoulder, warm and solid. Kieran's fingers brushed her wrist, fleeting but intentional. Support from both sides. Balance. Take her into custody, Davith ordered his guards. She'll face justice in both kingdoms. As Lady Thorne was led away, Kieran turned to Mira. You fought without weapons, without training, and you were magnificent. I had weapons, Mira corrected. I had both of you. Davith's laugh was rough but genuine. We had you. There's a difference. They emerged from the catacombs to dawn breaking over the tower between, battered but standing. The summit delegates, having survived the night's terrors, gathered in the damaged great hall with new sobriety. "The treaty," Lord Brecken said hesitantly, "with Lady Thorne's treason revealed." "The treaty stands," Davith declared, "strengthened, not weakened, by what we survived together." "Agreed," Kieran said, "and I propose an amendment." The creation of a new position, Ambassador of the Bridge, someone who serves both kingdoms equally, someone whose sole purpose is to ensure peace remains possible even when it seems impossible. Every eye turned to Mira. "I'm just a seamstress," she started to say. "You're Thomas Ashford's daughter," Davith interrupted gently, "and you're the woman who stood between two kings and made us better than we were." "You're the bridge," Kieran added, "built from courage and stubbornness and refusal to accept that some things can't be mended." Mira looked at both of them, Davith with his golden eyes and hard-won vulnerability, Kieran with his midnight gaze and protective shadows. She'd entered this story as a victim of history. She was ending it as an architect of the future. "I accept," she said, "on one condition. I don't serve either kingdom. I serve the space between them, the possibility space, and neither of you gets to dictate how I do it." Davith smiled, fierce and proud. "I wouldn't dream of it." "I'd be disappointed if we could," Kieran agreed. The treaty was signed at noon. 2 kingdoms, dozens of witnesses, and one seamstress who'd changed the fate of them all, not through grand gestures or military might, but through sheer refusal to let her father's dream die. That night, standing on the tower between's repaired balcony, Mira watched stars emerge over both kingdoms. Davith appeared on her left, offering wine. Kieran materialized on her right, bringing news of the day's diplomatic victories. "This is strange," she murmured. "This, whatever this is." "Unprecedented," Davith offered. "Complicated," Kieran suggested. "Ours," Mira decided. She didn't know which king's hand she'd eventually hold, or if the answer was somehow both, or neither. She didn't know if their fragile peace would last a generation or shatter by next spring. She didn't know how to be the bridge they needed her to be. But she knew her father would be proud. And for now, with 2 kingdoms watching, and 2 impossible men flanking her sides, that was enough. The seamstress had become a queen, not of crowns or countries, but of the spaces in between. The places where possibility lived. And in those spaces, she would weave a future worth fighting for. The end. Mira's journey from invisibility to power proves that sometimes the most revolutionary act is refusing to accept the world as it is. Her story isn't about choosing between 2 kings. It's about choosing herself, and in doing so, changing everything. Thank you for following this tale of courage, transformation, and the bridges we build when we dare to try the impossible. Which moment resonated most with you? What do you think happens next for Mira, Davith, and Kieran? Share your thoughts. I love hearing how these characters touched your heart.